afternoon and welcome to the Top 10 of the Best Home Recording Studio Tricks webinar. In today's webinar, George Whittam of VOStudioTech, a voiceover engineer to the stars, will help you make your home recording studio a great sounding and feeling place to work. George will also share his top 10 VOStudioTech tips to get great audio, which many don't cost a penny to even try. He'll also walk you through the list of examples of using photos and audio samples. Afterwards, George will take questions on anything recording related. So for today's agenda, we'll go over the top 10 tips. First, you'll learn how to use your microphone and position it. You'll position your copy, then your mic. We'll also learn how to loose the tubes. We'll look at the concept less is more and clean is king. Timing is everything, and learn how to be a night owl. And we'll learn about USB mics. Put the PC in the closet, not yourself. George will also teach us about getting a Mac and how to use TwistedWave. We'll learn how to blanket your area. And the final tip, making editing a snap. Okay, so for today's webinar guest, I'd like to introduce George Whittam. George is the owner and founder of Eldorado Recording Studios, now VOStudioTech. George is a 1997 graduate of Virginia Tech with a bachelor's degree in music and audio technology with a minor in communications. George went on to acquire considerable expertise in music recording by working with a variety of musicians and artists in the Philadelphia area. He also gained broadcast engineering experience working at a radio station in Philadelphia as the remote engineer for the NFL Eagles radio network. George was introduced to the world of voiceovers through a producer at the station, Howard Parker, who asked the station's engineer to help him build a home studio in New York City. George came along to assist and later followed Parker to Los Angeles and furthered his already diverse experience by working with over 14 film projects in 3 years as a sound mixer and a boom operator. From a handful of satisfied clients, George now has built a business that works solely with voiceover studios and clients. His extensive knowledge of computers, software, equipment, and troubleshooting abilities makes him a sought-after expert and indispensable on-call technician. He is globally considered a top authority in voiceover recording technology. He's invested thousands of hours researching studio design, recording equipment, and creating training materials for voice actors. In doing so, he's become an industry innovator by developing specialized services that cater exclusively to voiceover professionals. Among his many successful clients are the late Don LaFontaine, Joe Cipriano, and Scott Rummel. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on our host for today's webinar, George Whittam.
Hey everybody, hope you can hear me okay. Boy, I got to trim that bio down a little bit, don't you think? Man, that thing's long. Anyway, that's me. Some funny things happen over the course of your life, and all of a sudden you find yourself running a business and working in the voiceover industry, a world that I didn't even know about 10, 12 years ago. So you never know what's going to happen, right? But that's all I do now, and I'm always trying to be on the cutting edge of the latest. Not only the latest, but also just the things that work. It's not always about having the newest, fastest, bestest, most expensivest, whatever stuff you can think of. It's really more about having the right tools for the job and having them be efficient, reliable. Of course, pretty easy to learn is obviously high on the list. But it's also what tends to happen. People tend to get caught up in price. You know, they think, well, this is too inexpensive. How can it be good? I hear that a lot, and I think that's a common misconception. It doesn't have to be expensive. A mic doesn't have to be expensive. The interface that you plug your mic into the computer with doesn't have to be really expensive. There are some great things out there that work very well for reasonable cost, and there's also a lot of very practical solutions that don't cost a lot to implement in your home studio that will make it sound like a professional studio. So that's kind of what we're going to go through today. we're going to do it in the form of sort of a top 10, and we are going to count down from 10. So we're going to do it in reverse order. So we'll start off with number 10, about making editing a snap, or make editing a snap. So what I'm referring to when I say make editing a snap, when you're recording, especially long form where there's going to be a lot of edits, most likely, unless you're like a superhuman narrator that never makes mistakes, you're going to have a lot of mistakes over the course of, especially, let's say, an audiobook, which I'm sure many of you are now plunging headfirst into the world of audiobooks, I would imagine. So one of the key ways to make it easier for you to go back into your editing later is to simply add some sort of a mark in the audio file that makes it easy to find your mistake. So when I'm talking about making editing a snap, what I'm talking about is, let's say I'm using TwistedWave, which I'll talk about later, and I'm recording, and I want to all of a sudden decide that I want to make a marker in the audio file. I simply snap my fingers at that point where I make a mistake. And what that does is it makes a sharp spike in the wave file, in the waveform that you see in the editor, and makes it very easy to find where the mistakes are so you can go back and edit them later. It's a really great tool, and it's very useful for... let me see if I can share my desktop real quick. Let's try this. I know we didn't do this in rehearsal, but let's try it. Okay, there, you should be seeing my desktop. If something's not working, just yell at me. So there's
we can see the desktop.
Okay, great. So when I'm in TwistedWave, while I'm recording, I can be reading some script, blah, 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 and all of a sudden, let's say, for example, from Bad Leroy Brown to Time in a Bottle, Jim's writing and heartfelt songs touched me in a... Jim's writing and heartfelt songs touched me in a way that left me excited and yet speechless. So, as you can see, at the point where I made my mistake and I had to do a pickup, I snapped my fingers. So let's imagine this file was, oh geez, I don't know, half an hour long, because it's like an entire chapter of a book. Well, when it comes time to edit this thing, you're going to have to go through, normally you'd have to go through and listen to the whole half hour and find all the mistakes. And most of the book should have been mistake-free. So that's time's a wasting. So if you can go back and look at your file and find an issue like this one, it's touched me in a... Oh. And all I have to do is find where I pick up the mistake. Jim's writing and heartfelt song. Okay, that's where I picked it up. So I'm going to put a marker. From Bad Leroy Brown to Time in a Bottle, Jim's writing, and that's where the mistake section began. So I'll put a marker there. I simply delete the bad piece of audio after I've made markers showing where the start and the end is. Delete. From Bad Leroy Brown to Time in a Bottle, Jim's writing and heartfelt songs touched me in a way. And the edit is clean. So just snapping your fingers or using a dog clicker or any kind of tool will really help you when it comes time to do your editing. So I'm going to stop sharing my desktop, go back to the presentation. All right. So that's editing as a snap when you use your fingers. So you could also use a dog clicker and one of those training things. Those work really well too if you're not a good finger snapper. There's a picture of one right there. Next one, number 9, is blanket the area. So that is referring to, as you probably may have guessed, acoustics. Moving blankets, relatively inexpensive, readily easily findable or locatable. Moving stores have them, and now companies online that actually specialize in acoustics are even selling them because they're a very cost-effective way to keep the sound in your recording area from bouncing around so much. You can actually make a makeshift booth very easily using acoustical blankets. It won't soundproof the booth, but it will keep the echo or reverberation from bouncing around the room, from muddying up your recording. So using moving blankets as a means of acoustical treatment is actually very much an accepted technique that is really effective. The areas where you have to be careful, where they don't always work so well, is if you're trying to treat the interior of a closet. Small closets, they resonate quite badly. with your voice. And the blankets, unless they're layered in very thick, maybe 2 or 4, even 4 layers thick of material, will not do a very effective job of absorbing all of that low frequency energy. So beware. It's not; these aren't always a panacea to fix a problem, but they can be pretty effective. Here's a picture of them being used to create what I would call sometimes a dead corner. They're just taking a room in a bedroom or an office, covering that corner of the room with acoustic blankets. And in this case, they're using it in conjunction with another device that's going around the microphone. That one looks like it's called a mic thing. There's things called reflexion filters, mud flaps. There's all sorts of things. Even Harlan Hogan's porta booth can be used. And so what's going on here is it's not easy to tell, but the microphone is actually on the other side of that mic thing. And the actor stands in the corner with his or her back to the corner, facing outward. In a configuration like that, you'd be surprised at how well it works and how clean the recording will be. Again, these solutions are not intended to be soundproofing. There's nothing you can do with a blanket or any amount of foam that will stop noise from getting in. So that we'll talk about in a little bit, how to deal with that. But this will reduce the echo in the recording, which is very, very important. This is not a really great example, although if you're really careful, you could make this work. But the problem with this setup is we've got a big desktop around the microphone, which reflects sound into the mic, and they've got some foam there, which is going to help, certainly. But the real problem I see here is that the laptop and the microphone are both sitting on the same hard surface. And what tends to happen is the hard drive, the noise from the hard drive, which is vibrating, is going to vibrate the desk, and then eventually that vibration will get into the mic stand, up into the mic, and actually get into the recording. And so it'll create this very sort of low but dull sort of a hum through the recording. So you got to be really careful about this kind of setup. You might be able to get away with it if you were to put the laptop up on some rubber feet or something soft and cushiony to keep it from vibrating the desk, but be really careful about a setup like this. Number 8. This is probably the most controversial slide because it involves potentially spending the most money. But I'll explain why. Buy a Mac and buy TwistedWave. Obviously, for those of you who are PC users, I'm sure one of the reasons you've decided not to buy a Mac over the years is 1, the learning curve, and 2, the cost. And I will tell you that I'm coming from a background of using Windows computers for, I've been using PCs since DOS and then Windows 3.0 on. And I didn't like the Mac for many, many, many years. In fact, I used Mac in college because our recording studio at school had them, and I still didn't like them. But now I find them to be very easy to use, much more intuitive. But more so than that, I find them to be extremely reliable, and customer support and service from Apple is absolutely second to none. Even if you have a 5, 6, 7-year-old laptop that you might have bought from Craigslist or eBay or your local Apple reseller, because there's shops all over. I know in LA there's many shops that sell used Apple equipment for a lot less than what it costs new. You'll still get support from Apple. If you take it in, they will still help you at the Genius Desk and walk you through questions and issues with your computer. So the support is fantastic. But another reason is the Mac can run this software called TwistedWave. And I showed it to you a little bit a few minutes ago. That's what I was demonstrating with. TwistedWave is just absolutely fantastic. It is the most simple to learn, efficient, reliable, and feature-packed recording software that directly targets the voiceover user. I'm not a voice actor. I do editing, I do training, and I do tech support, but I use TwistedWave all the time for my editing. When I need to do any editing projects, I'm using TwistedWave because it's very fast, it's very easy to learn, and it also has some really cool features like things like batch processing. So let's say, for example, you have to do some kind of e-learning project. And I know people get these jobs and they can be very large and they can be very lucrative, but they're also incredibly tedious because sometimes they'll say, well, we need to have 1,000 prompts recorded, 1,000 different audio files. TwistedWave has some tools that make it really easy to split that file or that audio file into many, many, many pieces and automatically convert them to MP3 and rename them as you need, as necessary. There's tools like that make it just fantastic. There's another thing that I love about TwistedWave, and it's called stacks. And a stack is an audio processing preset that you can load into your TwistedWave software that will basically act as an audio processing preset that you can recall at any time. Now, the beauty of this is I can create the preset for you, send that stack file to you over email or whatever, and when you open it on your end, it's as though I was sitting right there in your studio, right next to you, and tweaking the software for you. And you can immediately reproduce all of the audio processing settings that I devised for your setup, for your type of voice, the kind of read you're doing, your room acoustics, all that kind of stuff. So it's super, super efficient, easy to learn. I can't say enough good things about it. And it's about $80, so it's very, very cost-effective software to use. Then you can download it from twistedwave.com, and they give you 30 days of free demo period. And I also have tutorials over at VOStudioTech.com under the Tuts on Demand tab, where you can learn TwistedWave very quickly. All right, enough of TwistedWave. Sold that long enough. And because it's Mac only, and that's why the two of them work very close hand in hand. It's a Mac only program, and they do make TwistedWave also for iPhone and iPad, which works fine. It just doesn't have some of the higher end features like batch processing or the stacks, but still it's very capable. All right, number 7, put your computer in the closet, and not always yourself. Obviously, we all have different issues we have to deal with in our home studio. Some of it is noise, some of it is acoustics. Usually it's a combination of the two. And one of the noisiest things in most people's studios in their home is going to be the computer and or the external hard drives, USB hard drives, that kind of thing. So the first instinct I've seen is that someone will, all things being equal, if the rest of your home and the outside around you is relatively quiet, they'll often put themselves in a closet because they figure, well, that's the only place I can go to get the right sound, the acoustics and all that stuff. In all actuality, closets sound really lousy. They need a lot of work, and sometimes you have to cram yourself into a closet with a lot of clothing to get nice sound, because otherwise the closet will resonate, as I was talking about earlier with the blankets. So in many cases, if you have a noisy PC tower or a big Mac Pro that has noisy fans or hard drives, that kind of thing, then you have to deal with that issue. And the best way to do it, I think, is to put the equipment that's noisy in the closet, not the other way around. Put the noisy stuff in the closet, and you work outside of the closet in a larger space that's more comfortable, and that is going to be a little easier to get nice recording out of, nice recorded sound. So that's my philosophy on closet versus outside of the closet. USB mics don't suck anymore. Well, at least not all of them. Ashley, I noticed how you skipped over that slightly racy term. So, but it's true. USB mics had a bad rap for a really long time. And that's because, well, they were new and they were never really being made with professionals in mind. They were being built for, people who were just maybe doing podcasting or just amateur musicians that wanted to record themselves at home. So, the quality, though, because USB mics are being used more and more for more uses, they are increasing the quality of these mics. And the quality of audio that can be recorded now from a USB mic now is quite amazing. It's gotten so much better since maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And a couple examples of USB mics that I find to be up to snuff that will get you what we consider to be professional recording quality audio are a couple here. Let's see, we've got the one on the left is a very, very popular one called the AT2020, the Audio-Technica 2020 USB. These are well known to be found on the internet for $100 to $120. And from a plug-and-play mic perspective, that'll work on a Mac or a PC, and with an iPad, if you're really clever using a USB hub with a power supply, it will work with almost anything and get some pretty darn good recording results, surprisingly good for its cost. And for most people, it's a good starter mic, and some people throw one in their laptop bag when they're traveling in case they need to bang out a recording or an audition while they're on the road. And because it's so inexpensive, you're not so worried about it getting damaged and that kind of stuff. So my favorite USB mic is actually the one on the right, and that's the Shure PG42 USB. The reason I like that one is it takes the Audio-Technica to another level of quality. It's got a better capsule. It's got lower noise. So in other words, when you're recording something very quiet, it has very little background noise. It also gives you the ability to adjust the microphone's gain or input sensitivity directly from the mic with a little gain control. It also has an interesting feature, and that is it has its own headphone jack. And I know most voiceover coaches will tell you wearing headphones while recording voice acting is not a good idea. And in general, that is true. But having the headphone jack on the mic is very, very handy when it comes to getting your microphone set up and working correctly, first of all. It allows you to hear that the microphone is working and help you position the microphone because you can hear yourself talking in real time. So it can be pretty useful. It also has a shock mount. That's that suspension that comes, that's the mic is mounted in. And it also has high pass filter, which is a switch on the back that keeps low frequency noise, we also call it rumble, from getting into the recording while you're recording. So a couple nice features in the Shure PG42, and that's about twice as much money. You're going to be looking at about $250 for that mic. But again, for what it costs, it's quite remarkable. Here's another detailed view of that mic showing its rear, showing that it's a USB jack, and then there's the headphone jack. There's the pad control, which you rarely would need, but sometimes kicking the pad switch is handy if you have to switch to shouting for a video game or some kind of maybe animation audition where you have to get really loud. And then it's got a monitor control, and that's a blend control that lets you decide how much of your own voice you want to hear versus how loud the playback is. So if you're doing, say, punch and roll recording where you have to punch in, you can adjust that little monitor dial to get the perfect blend of audio coming in and coming back out. It's also really cool for Skype, too. So I was saying earlier that you can't always soundproof, and sometimes doing it cost-effectively will be extremely expensive. Or cost-effectively is expensive. Yeah, that doesn't make sense, does it? Sometimes soundproofing is very costly. And so I often will recommend to those who are not having to work during normal business hours, so to speak, and are being basically working self-directed, that you take advantage of that fact and you work on your own time and on off hours when you have the least amount of noise. This is definitely an issue here in Los Angeles where I am. I'm very lucky that right now there's no trash truck dumping a huge dumpster or a saw right next door at the construction site. We're having a little reprieve right now, so we're lucky. But timing is everything. Become a night owl when you have to. It's just, there's no way to get around some of the most extreme noise issues, even with say if you have an isolation booth, if you have a whisper room or vocal booth or one of those kind of things, the most severe noises will still get through and still get into the recording, like a jackhammer right outside your house. The only way you're going to keep out a jackhammer or a really loud Harley Davidson or something like that, a helicopter, is by doing some custom construction. And we've built studios here that with VOStudioTech that have been able to keep those sort of sounds out of the recording. But we're looking at $20,000 to $30,000 projects. So it's quite costly to get that kind of isolation. Work at night, avoid the leaf blowers. Oh, boy, that's a scene. It's all too common here in LA. Lots of leaf blower noise. And work at night whenever you can, especially if you're doing audiobooks where you need long stretches of uninterrupted recording time. The emptiness of space. Okay, less is more, clean is king. And that, what I'm referring to here is about your equipment, how much equipment you use, what is your signal chain, which is, microphone to, how do you get the microphone to plug into the computer is basically what I'm saying. There's a lot of ways to do this. Oh boy, is there a lot of ways. Well, the simplest of all is what I showed you with the USB mics, USB cable into the computer. It's very, very simple. But for some of you, you're going to find some limitations, or you're going to find that you want to just, take it to another level of audio quality, or you like bells and whistles. So it's going to be hard to resist adding more equipment to your studio. Well, one issue with that is the more equipment you have, the more problems there are to solve, and the more noise there is that can get into the recording. I was just digging through some pictures to share in the slideshow, and this one came along today. This is actually Don LaFontaine's home studio when I first saw it. So the first day I walked in and he asked me to work on it, this is what I saw. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, who sold him this humongous mixing board? It was just totally overkill. And his recording quality at the time, he was having issues. It was noisy. There was all sorts of stuff going on. And I felt bad. Somebody had done this whole project for him, then sort of fell off the face of the earth and never really helped him and made it sound better. So first thing I did was got rid of this dinosaur of a huge mixer and got that out of there. And we cleaned up his studio signal chain by simplifying. This next slide will show you an example of what I've actually removed from some studios when I do my studio cleanup. That's actually what I pulled out of a studio once. That's most of the wiring that was in the studio. And it's amazing how bad it can be sometimes, especially when your studio sort of evolves over time. Some of you may have come from radio or music, and you've had a studio for a while, but now you're doing voiceover and you're realizing, I don't need all this equipment anymore, but it's too much work to redo it all and clean it up. Well, this is the kind of thing that I have found in the occasional studio, and nothing makes me feel, sometimes nothing makes me feel better than being able to go into someone's studio and remove a bunch of stuff. It's kind of a cool feeling to be able to eliminate tremendous amounts of equipment that aren't necessary in cables. So that's an example of what I'm talking about. Remove and reduce the amount of signal chain and keep it simple. Here, this particular studio setup was using a Blue brand microphone and plugging straight into something called a MicPort Pro, which is a very simple device that just takes analog audio with a mic preamp, converts it to USB, and sends it into the computer. The combination of that mic and the MicPort Pro together, I think, is under $500. But the resulting recording quality was nothing short of phenomenal. And so that was a really important part of it, but it's also the acoustics. And in this case, she had just had some curtains in a corner, and we were getting too much echo, and I created this custom acoustical paneling setup, which I admit now may be a little overkill, but for her needs, it did a great job and reduced all the echo around her and gave her a nice, dry, dead recording. So it really comes down to, if you set yourself a budget, let's say you've got $600, you already have a computer, but you got $600 to spend. Spend $200 of that on the USB mic. Maybe spend $80 on software, maybe TwistedWave or SoundForge if you're using Windows. You can use Audacity. Yes, it does work. Nothing really wrong with it, just not my favorite tool. And then spend the rest of that money on acoustical treatment to make sure that the recording quality is as good as it can be. And some of that may, be budgeted to a consultant like myself or some of the others out there who help with home studios to make sure that the money you're spending is going in the right places. The top 3. Okay, here's another one that may be controversial, and that is lose the tubes. I am not a big tube equipment fan. There's been a really big resurgence in the last 15, 20 years, especially the last 10, of tube equipment. And I think it's because of the popularity now and of everything now having gone completely digital, and people having this impression that digital recording is going to be lifeless, antiseptic, and all these things. So they've been doing things to kind of, reverse that issue by adding in more noise, adding in distortion, adding in other things to make it sound like it was recorded on the old analog equipment of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So tube equipment has had a major resurgence, and they're sticking tubes in everything. Everything from a really cheap art tube mic preamp for $50 to I've seen tube microphones for as little as $200 and for as much as well north of $6,000 or $7,000. And mic preamps with tubes are popular, and like the Avalon 737 SP, that's a really popular one, tube preamp. And the biggest problem with tubes is they are inconsistent. So tubes are sort of like a light bulb, although with light bulbs, they sort of burn out and they either work or they don't. With tubes, they actually degrade over time. The componentry inside will actually slowly start to degrade in quality. And so your audio will start to change, but it does it in such a long, drastic, not drastic, but in such a long, drawn-out, subtle way that maybe 2 years goes by, and all of a sudden now your recordings, well, all of a sudden, if I was to hear it, I would notice it, but now your recordings have more noise. Maybe the recording sensitivity has dropped, so now you have to turn up the gain even more, which means more noise. Or just the overall tonal quality has degraded, and that's because these tubes wear out. And they have to be replaced every year to 3 years, depending on the equipment and how many hours a day you use your equipment. So, again, I'm not a big fan of the tubes. I don't find that they really give the home studio any real major benefit. In a professional studio where there's a full-time engineer or a professional recording engineer who's trained and knows how to get every last ounce out of the equipment, they can take advantage of a tube because they know exactly what gain setting to use and exactly what they have to do to get that sound out of that microphone or that preamp. But in a home studio situation, you don't have the luxury of being able to tweak things while you're recording. You want to set it and forget it. You want to hit record, find the gain setting, the microphone volume setting that works for you and in that kind of copy, and that's it. Hit record, stop looking at the computer, or maybe if you're reading the script off the screen, hide the recording software so it's not distracting you, and start recording. If you're having to think, am I modulating correctly, and how far up into the VU meter am I going on this preamp, and da-da-da-da, and you have to think about all of that, it's going to make it much harder for you to do your job as a voice actor, and you are an actor, number one. All this engineering stuff has been thrust into your lap or thrust into your face in the last few years, and I'm just trying to keep you guys from getting stuck in the technical black hole and keep it simple. And that's why I think getting rid of tubes is a really smart thing to do, not getting stuck in the tube mystique of tube equipment. Number 2, position your copy and then your mic. And this number 2 and number 1 definitely sort of dovetail, so I'll kind of run them together. But I'll start with number 2. The way you position your copy with your microphone is really important, because that copy stand is this large reflective surface that is going to bounce sound from your mouth and reflect it back into the microphone. And what that does is it creates what we can sometimes call a comb filter. It creates that kind of phasey, kind of diffuse, sometimes people say hollow sound that is not desirable. And why that's happening is the sound of your voice is not just being picked up by the microphone directly, but it's also being picked up by or from the reflected sound of your voice from any hard surface near the microphone, be it a desktop, a computer screen, a copy stand, your copy itself, whatever. So what happens is that sound, it bounces off the copy. It also gets recorded directly by the mic. And when those two different signals, or two or more signals, reach the microphone, they are slightly out of phase. What that means is one is getting there a little bit before the other. The speed of sound is not like the speed of light. It's nowhere near as fast. And you actually will have, oh man, now I'm trying to remember what the speed of sound is. I think it's 330 meters per second, but don't quote me on that. But the speed of sound is such that if you have the audio traveling two different paths to the microphone, one is going to be slightly behind the other by maybe a half a millisecond or a millisecond. But that's long enough to make two audio wave files interfere with each other. And two waveforms interfere with each other, and it colors the sound. So it's really important to make your microphone and copy stand, or however you hold your copy, work together. And so I always find it important to position the copy first. In this case, the actor is standing at a copy stand that may not be quite tall enough. And if you look closely, she has the copy maybe clipped to the very top edge of the stand to get it up higher. And nowadays, if you look around, you can find copy stands like the Manhasset, I think it's the 48T, that are much taller, so you can get your copy at a very nice high height. So when you're standing, you're looking straight at the copy and not down at the copy, because that helps the quality of your voice and keeps your vocal cords open. And so once you get the mic stand positioned correctly with your copy and you're in a comfortable position, then you'll position the microphone around the stand. So you have to get the copy first. The ergonomics of the position of the copy is very important. Then position the microphone to pick up your voice. What often happens is people will position the microphone first and then try to read their copy. It's a very common thing to take the microphone, basically have it right in front of your face, the way you often see it done on music videos when there's a singer or a radio DJ. But the thing about radio DJs and singers is it's very, very rare they're going to have to be reading anything. They're not reading a script or anything. So it's fine. They can have a microphone right in their face. In voiceover, you got to read that script. You still have to be able to see it clearly and not have any obstructions. So we can position the microphone in such a way that you can read your script and the microphone isn't in your face. From the angle of this photograph, it's kind of hard to tell. But what's going on here is the microphone isn't directly in front of her. It's actually a little bit to the side and pointing toward her, maybe at a 20 to 30 degree angle. And as long as that capsule is pointing at your mouth and within a nice sweet spot distance of maybe 6 to 8 inches away from your mouth, you will sound like you're on mic, and you'll sound very pleasant, very present also, and very clean. Now I'll show you an example of what I don't consider to be a very good position. Now I don't have a problem with the mic position here. That mic position is actually pretty good. I might actually raise it a little bit. And the reason I would raise that microphone up is because her copy is, for one thing, too low. So she's having to look down at her copy stand while she reads, which is not necessarily a good thing for your vocal cords, and it's not a good position. The other problem here is that the copy stand in this shot will actually act as a very effective reflector and actually reflect the sound right back into the microphone. It's kind of like, I like using the pool game analogy. So you're trying to bank, do a bank shot, and you got to bank the 8 ball off the rail and get it into the corner pocket. Well, here with audio and recording with a mic stand near the mic, we want to avoid the bank shot. So you can use your knowledge of bank shots and angles and a little bit of geometry, or whatever. You can sort of visualize it and say, well, the sound's traveling in a straight line. If it bounces off the stand and reflects off, where's it going to go? Oh, the microphone. And play around with the position of the stand. If she were to take that copy stand and flatten it out so it's a little bit more vertical, it would not be reflecting the sound back into the microphone, and it will make a better, clearer sounding recording. Another thing is that stand, it's kind of hard to tell. They may have something on the surface of the stand. Actually, there might be a little bit of carpet on there. But in general, any kind of metal music stand that you're going to use, make sure it's completely covered with something soft and absorbing, like a bath or a hand towel or a big piece of carpet sample that fits the stand. Or I like those rubber mats that you can buy for lining your kitchen drawers from like the home supply store or the general store or whatever. And you can get those things and roll them out and sort of use some spray glue or just tape it on. That works really well. But you need to keep that reflection from getting into the mic, and you need to keep the stand itself from ringing and resonating and making noise while you're recording. So last but not least, number 1, learn to use your microphone. Positioning is crucial. And, I think I put this one at number 1 because it's one of the most common mistakes is bad mic placement, but it's also the least expensive problem to fix. So I love problems that you can fix without spending a dime, and this is definitely one of them. In this particular photo, we've got a fellow named, there's a voiceover book producer or audio producer named Dan Friedman, and he took this photo of himself at what looks like to be a Neumann TLM 103, possibly. A pretty nice microphone. And he's using this, I will often call the sort of the hang 10 trick. So he's got his thumb and his pinky splayed out in front of him to give him a distance gauge as to how far away to place the microphone. So if you use that sort of hang 10 gauge, that's going to give most people an average of 6 to maybe 8 inches of distance between yourself and the microphone. And that is a really good sweet spot where the microphone picks your voice up with the most, I would say, overall clarity, but also accuracy. If you get too close to the microphone, you start getting what we call proximity effect. And proximity effect is if you're too close to the mic, it starts to get very bottom end heavy. Let me see if I get really close to this microphone, it starts to get very kind of muddy. And you also start hearing more breathiness. And the worst thing of all is you might start getting some plosives, pop, pop, pop. You just might start popping the mic. So mic position is crucial to avoid popping. It's very crucial to avoid popping, and it's also very crucial to avoid proximity effect. Now, every microphone's different. So some microphones, proximity effect may not be as pronounced, or you may actually want to use some of the proximity effect to your advantage to get the sound that you want. But that's the art of recording. It is not an exact science. There is experimentation that's required and improvisation to get the microphone in the position that you need, and that works well for you. So there's no perfect way for everyone. But this is sort of a guideline to get you started. If I set up a mic for you, I might not follow the same guideline. I might do something different. I might change the way everything's positioned completely based on your particular setup, how small your space is, how you're reading your copy. There's a lot of ways, but some of these techniques will help you get to a much better result more quickly. Here's an example. Notice here that the microphone is actually above the mouth and not right in front of the mouth. And there's not even a pop screen on this mic. So there's nothing to actually even catch popping from, plosives. Well, because of the microphone's position, there's not likely to be any popping or plosives. Reason being is that when you pop, make that P sound and that blast of air shoots out of your mouth and it hits the microphone, that pop is traveling in a straight line. It's a blast of air like it's being fired out of a gun, and it shoots straight out, usually. However, your voice is radiating out in a much wider pickup area, a much wider a much wider sort of cone shape. And so the microphone can actually be placed, several inches higher or to the side than you might think, and still pick up your audio very presently and clearly. But the nice thing is once it's positioned that way, popping and plosives are a thing of the past because they can't even physically hit the microphone. So why am I wasting all this, or why am I spending all this time talking about this? It's done wrong so often, and it often leads to people shopping for microphones and other equipment unnecessarily. They think that their issue is the microphone. Often is the case. They think that spending a lot more money on a microphone is going to fix their problem. And I'm blown away sometimes at how great a cheap microphone will sound when it is positioned correctly. And the other things we talked about today, like acoustics, are sorted out. A really basic microphone can actually sound quite excellent. So mic positioning is so important. I can make the venerable Neumann U87, which is a approximately $3,000 studio microphone made in Germany, sound worse than a $100 vocal mic for singing live concerts, like say the Shure SM58, the most popular handheld microphone in the world. If I position those two mics appropriately for my test, I could very easily fool you and make you think that the handheld mic is actually the Neumann U87, the more expensive mic. And I won't touch a thing on my equipment. I won't fake it with equalizers or anything. I will just simply place the two microphones inappropriately. Or actually, I'll place the SM58 correctly, and I'll place the U87 incorrectly. And it's remarkable what can be done with correct mic placement. So that's my number one tip. I wanted to make sure that I think that is by far the most important because it's done incorrectly so often. Don't let me ignore one important thing as well. It is relatively easy to position the microphone backwards too. These microphones are symmetrical looking. So they have a front and a back that look pretty much identical. But if you look really closely at the mic, it will have a telltale, some kind of a logo or something that's indicating what the front of the microphone actually is. And I never want to take it for granted because it's not always obvious. So I'm going to go back and find a better picture of a mic here. There you go. Almost always the microphone front of the mic, the microphone side that it's facing you, that's picking up your voice, will have the logo or brand name of the microphone. So in the case of this mic, the Shure EG42, the brand name, the logo, everything is on the front side, the side that's facing you. In the case of this Audio-Technica, the Audio-Technica is facing you. Other microphones may have a little symbol, a little heart-shaped cardioid symbol, a little gold dot, or something that says this is the front of the microphone. But if it's placed incorrectly, you'd be blown away at the difference in the audio quality. It can sound like you're in an echoey room. It can sound like your acoustics are a total nightmare. It might even sound like you're recording with a different microphone. Maybe you might be accidentally recording with the microphone in your laptop computer, which is a very common issue. So double check, make sure the mic is actually facing the right direction. And also when you start recording, just give the microphone a very gentle scratch with your fingernail like this. That's not going to hurt the mic, but when you do that, your recording software will show a very distinct, very large blast of noise in the recording. because of that scratching sound, and it will tell you, yes, you're definitely using the right microphone. Never take that for granted. You'd be amazed how easy it is to record from the wrong mic when you're using a computer with a built-in microphone, like a laptop, or an all-in-one computer like an iMac. It's a really common issue. So that wraps it up for my top 10 tips. So I guess I hand this back to you at this point, Ashley, and we can talk more about Q&A.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much, George.
You're welcome.
So we do have lots of questions that have come in during the webinar. If anybody attending the webinar has any questions for George, then you're more than welcome to ask them in the Q&A control panel or the chat box, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen, and George or myself will be happy to help you out. So the first question here is from Rosemary. George, is there a tool that edits breaths? Can you invent one, please?
A sort of an automatic debriefing tool, I guess is what you're talking about. You know what? I've heard of some fancy audio processing plugins that call themselves debriefing tools. I've never found one that absolutely works on every kind of breath. The key to dealing with breaths is to learn how to breathe so that your breaths are not so prominent. And so some people, when they take a deep breath before recording a section, will kind of do a bit of a sucking sound. They'll go, like that. And the reason you're getting that much noise during the inhalation is your tongue position. So if your tongue is sort of pinching your throat closed, it's louder. I can suck in the same amount of air just as quickly, silently, like this. I'm taking some deep breaths, and there's very little or almost no noise at all. And the reason that is because when I'm breathing in, I'm positioning my tongue so that my throat is opened, and I'm allowing a lot more air to come into my lungs very quickly. Now, that's really important because if you can record with minimal breath sounds, you will actually be able to use something as simple as a noise gate to sort of automatically debreath the audio. But you can only do it if your breaths are quiet enough. They can't be very prominent. If they're too prominent, then they cannot be removed later, at least automatically. If they're too loud, you're just going to have to go through and do it manually. Now, I do have some techniques to speed that process up tremendously, and I do it with TwistedWave, and I can teach that technique. But there's no real fast way. If I'm editing an audiobook for somebody else, and there's a lot of big breaths, I have to go through and remove those breaths manually. And I do it visually. I actually scroll through the audio, through the chapter of the book, for example, and I can see those breaths. I know what they look like, and I can go through and delete them as I go through the book and do it pretty quickly. But again, recording with the minimal amount of breath noise is always preferable.
Okay, so a question from David. What is your opinion on home VO booths, such as whisper room or quiet rooms? Are they worth the expense?
Yeah, they're worth your expense if it's the only way to get enough quiet. And if you're really serious about the craft. You're going to be looking at, for a used whisper room, sometimes you can get lucky and find one for under $2,000. But you're looking at usually north of $2,000 plus shipping, labor to install, move it, all that stuff is costly. So I only recommend it when you've got a noise issue that just can't be dealt with. You're renting an apartment. You're in a family home and there's other people there and you just can't always tell them to be quiet. That kind of thing. That's when I think the whisper room or vocal booth or any kind of isolation booth is really going to be worth the investment. But if you can find a place in your home that's quiet enough to record the amount of time that you need to record, then that's always going to be preferable than to having to be inside of a box. Because they all, not only are acoustics an issue, because sometimes, well, actually in a lot of cases, the acoustics on these booths are not so great, and you have to do a lot of extra additional acoustical treatment to make them sound good. But also ventilation is a problem in these little booths as well. And some of them come with good ventilation systems, others not so good. And in some cases, the ventilation systems as well out of the box stock are too noisy. So you can't have the darn ventilation on while you're recording anyway. So there's a lot of considerations if you're having to go that route. And it really does come down to a case-by-case basis. And I get that question a lot, and I'm always happy to consult with people on what I feel would be the best situation for them based on how much room you have, how much ambient noise you have, the type of work you're doing, and all that kind of stuff, and as well as your budget. So that's something I get a lot.
Okay, so we have a question from Joe. I hear a lot about bass traps. My setup's main problem is wall echo. Will bass traps help, or is this more of a moving blanket problem?
Rule of thumb is the bigger the room you're recording in the case of recording voiceover, the less likely you'll need bass traps. So small spaces like closets need bass trapping most severely, as well as whisper rooms, things like that. They need quite a bit of bass trapping because small rooms resonate and ring almost like a bell at certain frequencies. And the smaller the room is, the higher that frequency is. So a small closet or a booth might ring and resonate at 160 hertz or even higher. And that's right in the middle of even the female vocal range. That's right smack in there. It's definitely not something you can easily filter out, and it's going to be there. But in a larger room, so if you're in like in a bedroom or an office and you're just trying to deal with echo from that room, just from what we call broadband echo, which is just sort of like that slap back or the bounce. For that, you don't need bass trapping. For that, you just need a more conventional type of acoustical panel, something maybe 1 or 2 inches thick. Acoustical foam would even work. And also moving blankets will actually help with that a lot. If I was in like a 10 by 12 bedroom and on a budget, and there's a bed in there and some other furniture and stuff, bass trapping's not going to be an issue, but reflection would be. And I would probably place blankets on most of the open wall spaces around there, or create a sort of a little wee hutty or a little tent of blankets around you to keep down the bass or keep down the reflections. So I would say moving blankets for sure would be the best way to deal with that.
Okay, perfect. So we have a question here from John. Why is wearing headphones while recording not a good idea? I'm used to doing this and prefer it.
It's not my rule. It's the rule of almost every coach I've ever heard speak on voiceover recording. And I'm wearing headphones right now because I'm used to it. I'm a recording engineer by trade. I've been using headphones for every part of recording and audio engineering for a very, very long time. But the problem with headphones is it tends to change the way you speak because the headphones are pumping the sound of your voice back into your head. It's very difficult to filter that out. It's a psychoacoustical issue. And so it will definitely change the way you do a recording. If you were to do a piece of script, especially like a character or something like that, and record it one time with headphones, take a break, then record it a second time without headphones, I think you'd find your performances or, the way your voice is, the way you're using your voice changes. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's hard to say, but most voiceover coaches will tell you that headphones change the way you hear yourself. And that was a discussion that came up on the voiceover bulletin board, the vo-bb.com. And so many people had said that, yeah, I used headphones forever, and then recently I got used to not wearing them, and now I try not to wear them when recording whenever possible because it's improved my acting. Headphones on your head are sort of the antithesis of acting. And you are acting, number one. And if you've got headphones on your head, pumping your sound back into your head, you're going to sound more like a radio DJ than an actor. And that is the kiss of death for voiceover acting, is to sound like a DJ.
Okay. For the sake of time, we'll wrap up the Q&A right now. If anybody has any more questions that they would like to ask George, then you're more than welcome to email him. His email address is george@vostudiotech.com. So before we go, I'd like to pass over to George one more time to explain the new VOStudioTech services that he's currently offering.
All right, cool. Yeah, I've always been available for hire by the hour. And I do that for people in LA and all over the world now remotely. And I can do that over Skype and phone and remote computer access. And there's a lot of ways I can do it remotely. But also, I've started doing more virtual services. And basically what that means is just send me an audio file and I will do what needs to be done and send it back to you. And either I'll do it for you or I will give you the information and train you how to do those things to your audio. So some of the services that I've been doing, and one of the most popular ones because it's free, is called my sound check service. And so if you go to my website and use the sound check service, it's right on the main menu bar at the top of the page. You can send an audio file to me. Just follow the instructions on the screen, and I'll analyze the audio for you and send back very concise but complete analysis of your recording. Not your acting, just your recording quality. I'll cover things like noise floor, mic technique, room acoustics, processing, things like that. Anything that I hear that is an issue, I will tell you what I think I hear and give you a really brief summary of what you might need to do to repair those things. And that is always free. Sometimes it may take me days to a week or so to get back to you because if my workload gets really crazy, I don't get back to the free sound checks as quickly. But if something is time sensitive, you can always book time with me to nip it in the bud more quickly. So you can hire me by the half hour or by the hour over the phone. And we can do that through vostudiotech.com, get help. You can click on the get help option. We do tech support and training. All these fixed price services we've added to our services menu now where you can just pay a flat rate to get something solved, such as an acoustical issue that you need to deal with. Or you want to create an audio processing stack for TwistedWave or a template for Pro Tools. We've got services that for all those different types of needs available on a flat rate. We also added this new service called our memberships, and they provide technical support for those who want to have basically an ongoing sort of way of ensuring that their studio is going to work when they need it. It's sort of like a combination of insurance and a maintenance plan, sort of all wrapped up into one. So the memberships will provide you with service all year round for the length of your memberships, and they're for year-long contracts. And there's all sorts of stuff we do, like preventative maintenance. We'll schedule every 3 months a call and or visit, depending on your location, to go through your studio, your software, and everything, and make sure it's all up to date. If you're not in LA and we do a remote support contract, then I'll log into your system, check what software versions you're running, see if there's updates that should be done, and see if there's anything that could be causing issues that you may not even been aware of. I'll also make sure you've been backing up, which sounds to some of you very obvious, but it's amazing to me how many people I deal with these days that still don't back up their audio. So I'll make sure you're backing up your computer, that sort of thing. So that's the membership services, and they start at $150 per month for the membership program. So check it out. I hope there's something I can do for you guys. And if you decide you want to try any of the services that I've mentioned today, we do have a coupon code called Voices 2012, and that will give you 15% off your first service. And so when you check out, I have sort of a shopping cart on the site. So when you choose a service and you do pay for it through the website, in which we take all credit cards and as well as PayPal. During the checkout process, there will be an area where you can enter a coupon code. Enter in Voices 2012, and that'll knock 15% off the service for you. And that coupon code will be good until the end of January 2013. So I think that covers it for today. And I really appreciate you guys. Appreciate your time, and happy holidays to you guys.
Perfect. Thanks so much for everyone that attended the webinar today. And a big thank you to George. We've gotten a lot of great feedback from the comments and the questions. I know everyone's going to be checking out the website after this webinar. So a big thank you to George today.
You're very welcome.
And as always, we invite you to keep in touch with voices.com. You can like us on our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, watch many tutorial videos like this webinar on our YouTube channel, and partake in the discussions going on in our LinkedIn group. So before we go, I'd like to mention that Voices.com is going to be hosting a voiceover conference called Voice World Toronto on Saturday, May 4th, 2013 at the Hilton Toronto Hotel. I've listed the website for everyone to check out for more information. So again, thanks to George, and for everyone that attended the webinar, we hope you have a great week and enjoy the holidays.
This has been a Voices.com production.